talent. So to officially start, I'll pass the virtual floor over to Aris. Get away, Aris.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing today? I hope everyone is safe and healthy wherever you may be dialing from. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. Are you all hearing me okay? Just give me a thumbs up or say yes on the chat button. Great. Okay, we can start. Again, like what Blanche said, welcome to our 10th webinar. And first of all, thank you for taking the time to join in our session this afternoon. Now, for most of you, maybe you already know me because we may have worked together because of our partnership in TalkPush. For newcomers, my name is Aris. I have been with TalkPush for the last 4.5 years, and I'm very excited to meet you all today. Now, just a bit of background. Prior to working at Tosh, I did come from a human resources background. Specifically, I specialize in recruitment and in organizational development. So OD was really my background before. So that means, Six Sigma, ISO, those are part of the methodologies that I have utilized in the past. And that really made me very passionate about workflows, process improvements, and building long-term solutions for businesses. Now, this has helped me in my role right now in TalkPush to connect with customers and to make their work faster and more efficient. Anyway, you can see my QR code on the screen right now. If you want to stay connected, if you would like to have a follow-up chat, feel free to scan the QR code. It will take you to my LinkedIn page, and we can connect after the webinar. Okay. So like what Blanche said at the beginning of the call, this afternoon we will be talking about how you and your respective teams can refine your recruitment workflow to attract the best talent. Now, like I said, I'm very passionate about this topic, specifically in customer success, because a major part of our role is to become a strategic partner of our customers and help them in improving their recruitment processes. After all, you guys should know by now that TalkPush is an automation platform, and our goal is to help our users increase productivity and boost efficiency. Now, that may mean lowering your time to hire, improving your cost per hire, or basically making your funnel conversion better via different augmentation tactics that we can deploy. Now, for some of you, maybe this may sound daunting and intimidating, but we will try to break this down into simple and easy to follow concepts that you should be able to bring into your respective teams. Before we go ahead with our agenda, I'd like to know the composition of the audience right now. Just a quick poll. Can you let me know if you are a TalkPush customer or end user? Or if not, let me just launch the first poll. There you go. Okay, I'll give you a few moments to answer, and then I will close the poll in a bit. Okay, great. Let me just close the poll now. So it seems like 90% of the people who are in this webinar are already using TalkPush. So that's great. And then there's a couple of people who are new to the discussion. Thank you for being here. Which companies are you guys from? So I know that some people are familiar names, like we have people from AFNI, from Accenture, from Tascos. Let us know in the chat so that we can recognize you later during the call. Okay, next. I also would like to ask everyone to tell me about your role in your company. So no, rest assured, this is not an interview question. I mean, it may sound like an interview question, but I just really wanted to know what's your role in your company. So let me launch the poll now. Tell me, are you part of the sourcing team? Are you part of the recruiting team? Are you doing end-to-end hiring? Are you part of the marketing team? Are you running analytics for your team? Or are you part of management or leadership? Or maybe you don't fall in any of those categories. I'll give you a few moments to answer. I'll give you 10 more seconds. I can see, okay, it seems like majority, or there's a good mix between members of the recruitment team. I'll close the poll now. There you go. Let me share the results. Okay, so there's a good mix between users who are doing sourcing, recruiting, and end-to-end hiring. And also there are people who are of management and leadership. And someone actually answered other. So I'm not sure who that person is, but can you please tell us in the chat who you are and what's your role in the organization for that person who said other. Okay, great. So I think we could move on to our agenda. Like I said, we will be sharing you a copy of this webinar as well as a recording of the presentation. So you don't have to worry about missing some of the information that we will be sharing today. I have outlined here 4 items that all of us should be able to complete at the end of the webinar. So first one, obviously, we expect everyone to recognize, at the end of this webinar, we expect everyone to recognize the need to take a look at your recruitment process. Everyone should be able to understand a simple but very powerful process improvement methodology. At the same time, you should be able to see how TalkPush can help you in process improvement. And last but not the least, you should be able to take away key concepts that you can directly apply in your respective teams or in your respective companies. Sounds good? Everyone still with me? Raise of hands. You still there? Okay. Let's get started. So what is really the fuss about? The title of this webinar is How to Refine the Recruitment Workflow to Attract the Best Talent. But why do we need to refine your recruitment workflow? One might say that, Aris, I'm already happy where I am right now. I'm sitting comfortably in my home office, and I think my team is already doing well. So why would I bother doing this? Well, you might be right, but let's take a look at indicators why workflows need to be refined. So here are some indicators. I'll be showing you a couple of indicators that should tell you that your workflow needs to be refined or revamped. First one, this graphic basically is telling me that, there are more and more candidates are dropping off from the process. So you might probably be noticing that, candidates are dropping off from the process. Yes, that's normal. The numbers will, it's expected the numbers will taper down from one step to another. But if you are seeing a very sharp funnel, then that means, more and more candidates are dropping off. Drop-offs can happen at the early step of the process, during sourcing, or it could be during the recruiting part, during the assessments, during the final interviews. Or it could even be as far as the onboarding. From the time that someone signs an offer, there are candidates who are dropping off and are not showing up during their day one. So, if you have been experiencing that, then you are most likely due for a process revamp. Second, still in relation to the first point, your workflow would need, some refining if your process steps are very time consuming, especially these days, in the time of COVID and everything is being done virtually. Having so many handovers from one step to another or from one process owner to another will of course result to a lot of drop-offs. And if your process is too complex, it really takes a lot of time, which definitely impacts the level of candidate engagement. Your hot leads can become cold, and supposedly you should be hiring this guy, but that person can become stale. So if you're experiencing that, then that means you might need a process revamp at this stage. Third, the third indicator would be if like this, like what you're seeing on the screen right now. This is very common among many teams. Even in TalkPush, I would say that sometimes this still happens. Usually when team members are doing a process in a number of different ways, I mean, supposedly there has to be a standard way of doing a process, but team members are doing it in their own style. Maybe meron silang diskarte on their own. That's a clear indicator that your process needs a reboot. A simple and plain process needs to work. It needs to work for everyone. So if someone is deviating from the process, like what you're seeing on the screen right now, someone may say, I forgot what the process was. then that means that you might probably have a problem to address. Okay? Now, last but not the least, your output from a process should be easily tracked and reported. What does that mean? At any given time, you should be able to count how many are in each step. In the case of sourcing to hiring, you should know how many are in the initial interview, how many are in assessments, how many are in job offer, etc. Reporting has to be seamless, and it should be able to give you the stats as fast as possible. If you don't have a clear understanding of your analytics and of your funnel, then again, you may have a clear need for revisiting your process. Now again, let's take a quick poll. Question for everyone. Based on the 4 indicators that you're seeing on the screen right now, who among you are experiencing any of these? So you could actually choose more than one. Let me launch the poll right now. So do you see a lot of candidates dropping off? Is your process time consuming? Are your team members doing various iterations of a supposedly standard process? Or are you unable to track data easily and consistently? I'll give you a few moments to answer. Don't be shy. And again, you can answer more than once. You can tick a box more than once. Okay. Couple of moments. Okay, great. I'm gonna end the poll now and share the results. So most of you, 60% of you, are telling me that more and more candidates are dropping off from the process. So yes, when you have that experience, that means something may be questionable with respect to your process. And and the others answered, it's a time-consuming process. Team members are doing various iterations of the process, and data can't be tracked easily. Again, those are clear indicators that your process may need a revamp. Okay, so now our objective in the self-assessment that we just did earlier is really to identify where there's a problem to be solved. I'm not sure if you guys are following the news lately, but there's a government politician, it's a politician basically in the Philippines, who made a pronouncement about the COVID issue in the Philippines, and he said something like, the first way to solve a problem is to acknowledge that there is indeed a problem. Have you heard of that phrase that was said by one of the politicians in the news? Maybe some of you has, but yeah, let me know in the chat if you know who that person is. But basically, my point here is all of us have a responsibility to be critical. So you guys, you're part of your respective organizations. It's important that you take a step back and look at areas where you can improve. To be frank, now is really the right time because things are relatively slower. Maybe for some of you, you're not hiring as much compared to your usual hiring volume, or maybe for some of you, you've actually stopped your hiring because of the pandemic. And when things are slower, that's a good opportunity to make some process improvements. The issue is when we fail to recognize that there's a problem. You are doing these four. You're wasting your company resources. You're giving your candidates a poor candidate experience. You are tarnishing your company's reputation because the experience that your candidates are getting is it's not good. And at the same time, you are setting up yourselves to fail. So it's really important that you recognize that there is a problem that needs to be solved. So maybe at this point, most of you are already saying, Aris, I get you. No need to rub it in. So what do you want me to do? What's next? Well, unfortunately, I think I still need to rub it in some more. I'll give you an example. So this is an example that we took from one of the teams that we worked with in the past, and this is how their process looked like before we stepped in. So first, the candidates are directed to a career site. And I'm sure I would like to assume that everyone knows the experience when you apply in the career site. In the career site, you see this long form, and the candidates need to fill out, all of those fields. Normally, it would take them 15 to 20 minutes to complete a very long form, and that's assuming they have all of the information that they need to fill out the form. And then after the long form, the candidate then gets fed into what looks like, this very complex train station. Just a quick story. I had a similar experience here in Tokposh, where we are hiring graduates for our graduate program. And we didn't realize that we created a team process, and I was involved in creating that process. We didn't realize that it was too tedious, and we only realized it when a candidate told us that, hi, sorry, Aries, I really appreciate the time that we took. I know that I'm already for final interview, but I don't think I still have the energy to complete the process. So that's what he said. And I was really taken aback, because all along I thought I did place that process to make sure that we are filtering the right set of candidates, and only the best candidates would make the role. But that's a good learning experience, because it only meant that our process was very tedious. It has definitely room for improvement, and it can be further streamlined. Now, as opposed to what you're seeing on the screen right now, what do you think about, this kind of process, which is kind of, it's straightforward, and it's cleaner compared to the previous one. You start with someone applying from any sourcing channels, and then you have, automation to pre-screen the candidates. The profile is automatically built on the platform. There's some automation to shortlist, reject, or move someone to the next steps. And that entire process can happen in, say, less than 5 minutes. How does that sound? So, let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of our candidates. What do you think would you prefer? That train station process, where, it's really a test of true patience, or would you rather have that quick and fun process that I just showed you in the last slide? Let me launch the poll right now. There we go. Okay, poll is launched. What do you think is the preferred method by candidates? I'll give you a few moments to answer. Interesting. Okay. All right. And then I think we have everyone in. I will end the poll now. Okay. Let me share the results. This is very interesting, guys. So can you see the results? I think you can. So 76% of you answered that you want a quick and fun candidate experience. You want to give your candidates that kind of experience. But there's still, a fraction of you, a quarter of the population or of the attendees who said, you want that first one, which is a true test of patience. I think that's highly debatable, and you can tell me later during the Q&A why you wanted that kind of approach. But yeah, maybe someone would argue, if a candidate really wants the job, that person needs to see it through the entire process. But obviously, we need to make sure that, let's be cognizant of the fact that candidates have expectations. They want an experience which is frictionless, and something which is as easy as probably, booking your Grab food or your Food Panda, or even as easy as adding a product into your Shopee or Lazada carts. They love a process that's dynamic, personalized, and transparent. This is, the entire meat of our discussion later. That's the main recipe for attracting the best talent. So now, how do we really do it? In the next few slides, which we will, it will comprise majority of my discussion, we will talk about a very simple methodology that all of us can use in doing a workflow revamp. Are you guys still there? Raise your hands if you're still there. Do I still have everyone here in the webinar? Great. Okay, let's do this. Now, at this point, I want to introduce the DMAKE methodology. So the make refers to it's a data-driven process improvement cycle, which is used for improving and optimizing business processes. I did tell you earlier when I was introducing myself that my background is Six Sigma, and the make improvement cycle is actually a core tool in Six Sigma projects. But of course, the make process, it's not exclusive to Six Sigma and can be used as the framework for any process improvement applications. Even you can apply this in your respective teams. Now, the make stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Maybe some of you are already familiar with this concept. If you are, please comment on the chat box. But yeah, we will explain what this really means. Just a disclaimer, this is not a Six Sigma Green Belt class, but what we will try to do is we will operationalize the concepts of the make in ways that you can easily apply in your expected teams. Okay? Right, let's get started. Let's start with define. The first step in the make process is to define. This is what we observed. So in TalkPush, we probably might have worked with more than 100 companies globally. And the first question that we asked them is, how's your process like? Can you tell me about what your process is? And do you have an existing documentation of your process? Believe me, 7 out of 10 companies that we speak to, they don't have their process documented. Maybe they know it by heart. They could talk. They could talk to us about their process, but they don't have a document that outlines what the process is. And for some cases, they may have something, but it's really already outdated. It's very important that when you revamp the process, you need to draw your process and visualize it, so that you know what are the steps that leads to the next. This gives you clarity on how your process looks like, and you'd be surprised that, like what you can see in the screen, there may be holes in the process that you didn't know that's there. There may be dead ends or even unnecessary steps that you can improve. But again, you won't be able to trigger any of these assessments if you don't have it on paper. So there are a number of tools that you can see on the screen right now, right? So there's Lucidchart, there's Draw.io, there's Whimsical. Those are online tools. Or you can use Microsoft PowerPoint or Visual, but whatever the tool that you'd like to use, you need to start writing your process now. For many of our customers, we've actually helped you in creating your process, so you could actually get this from your customer success manager. But if we haven't done that yet, definitely that's something that you need to start. There are a couple of examples on how you could create workflows. So obviously, this is the most basic one. A process flowchart basically just tells you, how does one step lead to the next. This is a very simple example. It just tells you, how what happens in the morning. Are you ready to? Your alarm clock rings. Are you ready to face the world? If no, you hit snooze and then you delay it for probably another 5 minutes, which happens to me. And then your alarm rings again, and then when you're ready, then you get up and move on. You can do this for any of your processes. You can start doing this. And then obviously the next step that you need to do is you need to mark steps in the process which you think are problematic. Where are the gaps happening? In this case, in this example, I placed an exclamation point next to the get up because that's where the process is, or where that's where the problem is for me. Another example would be something like this. It's somehow similar to the other one that I just showed you earlier. It's a much more complex version of the process flowchart. But this workflow basically shows you how a business or process functions. It's common when you're dealing with, say, process that involves several team members, and it's a way for you to illustrate how steps initiate and flow to the other teams. So I would say that at the very least, all companies should have a process, a workflow flowchart documenting your sourcing to hiring process. And like in this previous slide, you can mark your processes and identify where the problem areas are. That's the first step in identifying and defining your process improvement steps. Now, this one is my personal favorite. We call this a cross-functional flowchart. Some call it a swim lane flowchart, and that's really because there are swim lanes, right? So what are the swim lanes? This flowchart is really very useful when you are trying to illustrate how steps are connected between process owners or between different teams in the organization. When you create it this way, you would easily know, number one, who is the owner of the task, because that one is the one that, for example, in the example here, the ones that are in the internal facing swim lane would be obviously managed by the internal facing team, while the steps that are in the external facing swim lane are managed by the external facing team. So you would easily know who is the owner of a task, and at which point is the task handed over from one owner to another. And then, when once you do that, you would easily identify which one is causing the problems. Again, like in the previous examples, you can mark steps which are potentially problematic. And depending really on how your flowchart looks, you should mark those, like what I'm doing right now. So, that's the define phase. Like I said, this is where you define your problem that you'd like to fix. One way, one approach that you can do is to do a process walk. What is a process walk? Basically, you act like you're an auditor. You know what an auditor does, right? So auditor basically audits a process. An auditor asks around. So one of your team members could potentially do this and ask, okay, what happened? You talk to the first process owner first. What happens in sourcing? Okay, what's the next step? How do you move to the next step? And then you go to assessments, and then you go to recruitment and hiring. So once you're able to do this, then you would be able to map a process map based on what's currently happening, because that's the first step that you need to do. That's the first thing that you need to consider and to document. And when you're able to do that, you will be able to have a clear visual as to where the problem is and where should you look deeper. We still good? Okay, let's move on. So we just finished the define phase. Now let's move to the measure phase. What's the measure phase? In the measure phase, this is where you're supposed to measure the current process or performance. The ultimate question that you need to answer here is, how are we doing? I mean, what are the numbers involved in the processes that we have? In other words, you need to be able to establish your baseline. In my experience in running the make projects, this step normally takes a lot of time because more often than not, number one, data is not accessible. Maybe you're recording data, but it's in different places. Maybe you have a tracker for sourcing, you have a tracker for hiring, you have some data in TalkPush, you have some data in your in your CRM or in your applicant tracking system, or sometimes you don't collect the data at all. So so that really makes this measuring phase quite tedious and taxing. But this is very important because this is where you want to measure. You want to measure the time spent for each step of the process, as well as the drop of points. remember in our introduction earlier, where I asked, one of the clear indicators that your process needs a revamp is when you have high drop of points, from one step to another. And a lot of you said that that your teams are seeing a lot of drop-offs. So it's very important that you list them down. So here in the screen here, let me share, a couple of statistics that, recruitment teams should be measuring or reporting periodically. All of these, you're probably familiar with those, like lead to application ratios, final interview to job offer to hire, lead to hire, time to contact. I don't have a poll for this question right now, but who among you is able to measure all of these to this extent? You can put your comments in the chat function below. If you're answering yes, if your answer is yes, Aris, I have that, then that's great. That's great because the measure phase will be easy for you because you already have the data. But if you're in your mind, you don't know the answer to any of these questions, or maybe you know how to answer the question, but it would take you time to derive the responses to these questions or to these metrics, then this is something that you need to spend time on, because obviously you cannot move forward, or you cannot, measure improvement if you are not measuring your baseline. A classic example would be, let's say, maybe some of you may already are trying to lose weight. That's a classic example. Someone will say, okay, starting new year, I will get into this journey or road to fitness, and I will lose weight, during the year. But then you're not taking measurements. You don't know your current weight. You don't know your BMR, your BMI, and all that. Then okay, how would you measure your progress? Maybe some would say, I just look at the mirror, or I just look at the way that I wear my clothes. If it's if it fits me now and I wasn't able to wear it before, then there's some progress. Yeah, sure, that works. That works. But what if you're not seeing anything at all? Maybe your body's undergoing something, but you're not seeing it directly. So there's no way for you to say, I'm making progress. So that's why this step is very important. You need to measure your steps right now, so that we could, when we get to the improve phase, you will be able to measure your improvement. So again, the measure phase is all about collecting as much data as possible to help you paint a picture of current process. The main thing here is, it's not about finding a solution. In the measure phase, you're not supposed to find the solution. You're just trying to find the cause of the problem. You want to make sure that you're measuring your current processes, and then you know how to move forward. Okay, are you guys still with me? Yes, raise your hands. Still there? Great. Okay, I can see a couple of questions getting asked on the Q&A section. Yes, please put all of your questions there. Don't hesitate. I'm sure you have questions in your mind. Please put it there so that we can go back to all of those and answer them later. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The next step is analyze. So this is already the third step in the make phase. Analyze is, in the analyze phase, the main question that you'd like to ask is, what's causing my problem? One of the biggest challenges that the teams are experiencing is, they are trying to put solutions which does not necessarily address the root cause of a process issue. Without, if you're not analyzing your problems in a good, in an efficient manner, your team can be implementing solutions that they don't resolve the issues. In simple terms, you may be implementing stopgap measures. My favorite example when I was still back in my classes, in my Six Sigma classes, is this, the water bucket problem. What does this mean? Imagine that suddenly in your room it's raining, and then you saw that there's a hole in your roof, and then water starts to come in, and it's flooding your room. And then the common reflex is, okay, I'll put a pail or a bucket right below that that flooding, so that I could control the flooding in my room. Does that solve the problem? Yes, maybe temporarily, but that's just a temporary fix to the problem. I mean, later on, that bucket can get filled up, and it will again flood your room. So really, you're not addressing the real problem, because you're just implementing stopgap solutions. When you do this, I mean, it's normal that you would put a bucket, right? Because you want to control the damage. But you want to make sure that you are doing a deep dive on what's really the root cause of a problem. If you're losing your candidates at some point in the process, you need to ask why. Why are candidates not showing up for their next interviews? Why are candidates not showing up in day one? Why are candidates confirming that they would be submitting the requirements, but they won't do it in the end? You need to ask all of those questions, the more questions, to identify where the problem really is and identify the root cause. That's the main point of the analyze step. So here, for this example, there's a couple of things that you can do. The first one would be, you know, I'm not sure if everyone knows this, the ask five whys approach. Basically, ask five whys. So going back to the example earlier, there's water dripping from the roof. Ask why, because there's a hole. Why? Why is there a hole? Because maybe we placed something there to stop the hole temporarily, and we didn't replace the roof. And then why? Because we didn't have the budget. Why? Because we're not earning revenue or we don't have enough money. Why? Because you try to ask those questions again and again until you've come at a point where you can't answer it anymore. If you've arrived at that point, then that means you've already identified the root cause of the problem. That's the five whys approach. Another thing, another approach that you can use is to use the people process technology process or the approach. Basically, you look at your people. Who are the people involved in the process? Are the people considered to be the bottlenecks in the process? Are they equipped to do the process? Maybe they're overwhelmed because they're doing a lot of things. If you're a sourcing person, maybe you are trying to process 1,000 candidates every day. And that's really not possible. So maybe there's a question on the bandwidth of your people. Next would be, maybe there's a question on the process itself. Maybe there are bottlenecks that is stopping you from moving towards the next step. The bottlenecks can be a step in the process, or it could be a person. And lastly, are you doing things manually, or are you leveraging technology to improve your recruitment steps? Whatever that may be, you need to be able to identify what's really slowing you down before you move to the next step. Again, the goal of the analyze phase is to find and validate the root cause of business problems and ensure that the improvement is focused on the causes and not the symptoms. Normally, this would mean you brainstorming with some of your team members or some of the other members who are taking part in the process. Maybe it could be someone from different teams. But definitely, teams need to take part in analyzing your problem, especially if it's a recruitment problem, because again, that's what costing you money, that's costing you resources, and that's costing you the reputation of your company. Okay, still there? We are halfway through the process. It's 3:40. We have 20 minutes remaining on the clock. We have 2 steps left. Next. The fourth step in the process, which is the most exciting part of the process, is the improve phase. And it just means that you've already identified your root causes, and now's the time to determine exactly which steps will be taken to roll out the changes the changes that will address the process. So in this step, you do these things. Number one, definitely you talk to your team, you generate and evaluate solution ideas. I recommend that, like I said, you talk to your team members, you consult best practices either internally or externally, because more often than not, the problem that you're experiencing is something that's been experienced by someone else in the past. Especially in recruitment, these are all recurring business processes. Your process in company A may be a problem or used to be a problem in company B. So there has to be some way of where you can pull all of these best practices. In the case of TalkPush, we hold recruitment hacks events where we call experts from different companies and from different industries so they can share best practices on a certain topic. I'm sure if you're a customer of TalkPush, you may have joined some of those recruitment hacks. We've done it digitally back in May, if I'm not mistaken, and we should be able to run again another digital recruitment hack sometime in quarter. But yeah, that's the first thing that you need to do. You need to generate ideas and evaluate solutions that can help you save the problem. Next, obviously, you need to be able to determine the expected benefits from the solution. Some of you may be familiar with cost and benefit analysis or pros and cons or SWOT analysis. You have all of those frameworks, but definitely you want to weigh your options and you want to arrive at a solution that can really address the root causes that you've identified. Next, you want, obviously, once you've already come up with the solution, you want to put it again in writing, right? It's important that you revise your process maps and plans so that before you even execute, you have a set of instructions that everyone can follow easily before rolling it out. Once you have that, it's important that you define a pilot solution and the plan. I recommend to start small. So if, for example, if you are making changes in the recruiting team or in the sourcing team, you could first start with, say, a sourcing channel. Start with online. And then you could start with the channel who's managing employer referrals, or with the channel that's managing career sites or something like that. That way, you could control the extraneous variables in the process before rolling it out to the wider range. Okay. Last but not the least, you need to communicate your solutions to all stakeholders, and one thing that you should be able to accomplish is you need to make sure that everyone is fully bought in. It's very common that when you have a new process, and we've experienced this in TalkPush personally, where when we sign a contract with the customer, some of the users are, they don't like it. They don't want to move from their current process to the next because sometimes they look at it as a threat to the job, or maybe they're really used to the existing process. Why would they do something else or something new? So it's really important that you're able to communicate the benefits of an improvement to them before rolling it out, so that you can get them bought in the initiative. I mean, if it no, the worst would be, I mean, this would be the last approach, but obviously when you make changes on the process, you need to have an executive sponsor who will really drive this and mandate the change. So that could be your boss, that could be your director, your manager, who would say, okay, this is our process right now, and this will be how everyone will be rated and evaluated starting from here on. It's important that that internal governance is happening, because otherwise, the process execution or the process revamp will fail. One of the things that we can get from the steps that we talked about in the things that I discussed in the previous slides, from define, measure, analyze, and improve, is the fact that most processes fail because of three main things. Number one could be that it's a very manual process. For example, if a recruiter expected to filter 1,000 candidates in a day, then definitely, you can't do that in a timely manner, in an accurate manner. You will need help. Second, similar to the first one, when tasks are repetitive and tasks are, it does not excite the person, then, it will fail. Well, humans are, we are wired to think. We humans, we are not mechanical, we are not machines. So anything that's repetitive can get us boring in the long run. So the question is is there anyone in the group who is fond of doing repetitive tasks and low value tasks? I hope not. I really hope not, because if that's how you feel, then I don't know, maybe you're not in the right place. But really, if you're conscious about your output and your personal growth, you would want to be focusing on high value tasks, and you should be able to find ways to improve the boring tasks that you're managing. Last but not the least, processes fail when the tasks are time consuming. So imagine if you can sort 1,000 CVs in a click of a button. Just imagine that. Or what if you won't even need to click a button? It just happens in the background without you saying or telling it to do anything. It just does the sorting of resumes and applications in the background. Would that make your life easier? I hope so. I think so. If I'm a recruiter, if I am still a recruiter, if I had a technology to do that, I would be very happy. If you can automate the tasks that are manual, repetitive, low value, and time consuming, that would definitely make you more productive. And that would make you happier. And I'm sure it would for everyone. This is the part actually where I brag about our purpose in TalkPush. So I did mention at the beginning of the call that we are an automation platform. We're all for helping our customers, making sure that they become more efficient and more productive. And this is the part where I introduce autoflow. I'm sure some of you may already know this, but let me just share a video to illustrate how autoflow works. Okay, okay. Autoflow is a recent development in TalkPush. We just released it. We formally released it in May. So some of you may have already encountered it. But basically, Autoflow is designed for our users to create different layers of automation against specific parameters. For example, you're seeing on your screen right now, it's a simple illustration of how Autoflow works. It's an if and then statement, basically. You're teaching the machine to perform certain actions based on parameters. It could be something like shortlisting someone who has more than 2 years experience, or probably contacting a recruiter when someone is qualified, or moving someone to a different campaign, or sending a message to some candidates who are already pre-screened, or sending them an appointment link so that they can book without you having to do all of those. The possibilities are endless, and we are only scratching the surface. So right now we have all of these functions, or we have all of these actions on TalkPush. And soon we will be able to use autoflow for different scenarios, like in background screening, generating contracts and offers for your hires, triggering onboarding, re-engaging candidates, and many more. So if you are a TalkPush client and you are still not using autoflow, I would encourage you to speak to your customer success manager. It might be Carla, Ika, Rhea, Viel, or Eileen. Or you can even message me personally, or message Blanche personally, so that we can roll it out. We can plan with you and roll this out with you. This already comes with your subscription. So that means you don't have to pay for anything. You can make your life easier at the existing subscription that we have with your company. Now, I know that there are some of you who are not with TalkPush. So if this is something that excites you and when you want to learn more, definitely you can talk to us later after the call. You can reach out to me or Blanche, and we will give you a proper demo of how autoflow works. Okay, great. So again, that's the improve phase. And that's where you begin to roll out the changes that you would need to improve the steps, or improve the problems that you've identified in the previous steps. The last bit is control. I'm just gonna breeze through it because we are running short of time. But basically, in the control step, this is the part where obviously you verify if the improvements really happen. This is where you compare where you are right now versus your benchmark. So if it worked, if the solutions worked, then that's good. You can keep doing it and then revisit it again later on. If it did not work, which could happen, then obviously you can still go back to the improve phase, tweak the processes or the steps that you've improved, and run it again. So that's really what the control phase is all about. And this is where you again make sure that you have a standard documentation of your improved processes, so that it's documented, as well as the lessons that you've learned are already integrated in the documentation. All good? So that's the demake process. I'm sorry if I needed to breeze through the control step, but that's really about measuring and reporting and continuous improvement. But we have defined measure, analyze, improve, and control. So that's the demake process that I was talking about. We can do for existing customers. We can do this exercise with you, and with the help of my customer success team. We can talk after, or we can have a follow up discussion after the webinar or in the coming days. Okay. Now, I wanted to end this discussion with some with three important statements that will really guide you to make sure that you're successful in refining your recruitment workflow. The first one is, this is what I already talked about earlier, right? So the first step in solving a problem is admitting or recognizing that you have a problem to solve. This is the fire that will push you push your process forward, and it will make you see it through the end. So you need to recognize that there's a problem. Second one is, always monitor and measure. That's one of the golden rules. The improvements may be small or big, but you won't be able to recognize any of those if you're not measuring. So reporting and analytics is really key. And last but not the least, obviously, always remember that you have technology as your ally. Technology is not meant to replace you. It's supposed to make your lives easier. We in TalkPush, we always believe that we are not meant to replace recruiters, but to make their lives easier, make the candidate experience better. That may mean delegating some of the boring work to the machine, but in the end, the recruiter will be able to focus and give all of their love and energy to high value work. That is our main sole purpose in TalkPush. And with that, I end my presentation. We could go ahead with the Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much, Aris, for sharing your insights. That was very helpful. There are a lot of companies revamping their workflows to adapt to the new normal. So the insights are really great, and we hope you feel the same. So we have a couple of questions, but we only have 4 minutes on the clock, so we might have to extend a bit. If we won't be able to answer a few questions, we'll make sure to answer it in the email that we send. So let's start with the questions. Okay. So first question, do you think candidates dropping off means that they're simply not interested? If they were, they'd have the patience to stick until the end.
That's true. That's a valid argument. I know that some of you already, there's a couple of people who answered in the poll earlier that they would still want that tedious, long process because it's a really test of patience and candidate intent. But it needs to be a balance. You don't want to simplify it and your hiring numbers would suffer, meaning you're hiring people who are not qualified for the role. At the same time, you want it to be a bit stringent where you are balancing the requirement of your customer or of your client while making sure that you're sustaining candidate engagement. So, I mean, yeah, you need to take that into consideration, and definitely technology can help you in making sure that even if it's quite a series of steps, it's still a fun and enjoyable experience for your candidates.
Yes, I think it's very important that we deliver a fun experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just saw, Blanche, that someone said that there's no music in the video earlier. I'm really sorry about that. I will, when we send this material, it's just a background music anyway, so there's no narration on the video, but we'll send you a link to the video along with the presentation.
Okay. This one, here's a question. How can I best merge my previous workflow that has been proven efficient to a workflow that is more automated and tech heavy? Wouldn't that compromise the quality since chatbots can fully gauge the potential of a candidate?
That's true. That's also a very valid question. When you're dealing with technology, obviously, like I said earlier, right, you want to delegate tasks that are repetitive, manual, and takes a lot of time to the technology. So that could be administrative and mechanical tasks like sorting resumes, putting them in certain boxes or campaigns, moving them through folders, sending messages, sending them emails, sending them re-engagement activities. no, in those cases, the chatbot won't fail because those are administrative tasks that can be programmed in the technology that you're using, whether that's Stockpush or a different platform. But then again, there always has to be a handover between technology and the human side of the process, and that's where you could make it more seamless. Start with technology on low value tasks, and then do the human takes over at a certain step of the process. And speaking of making sure that you don't affect the entire process in an instant, like I said, you can pilot a certain topic or a certain improvement in a control group. So start with one channel first, start with Facebook or social media or job boards before doing it for the rest. So at least you could monitor the progress in one before rolling it out to a wider scope.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Aris. And here we have a question that's very interesting. How about the implementation? For us, since we have several recruiters, how can we track that the workflow is being used or I think being followed?
That's a very valid question. And that's where the control phase would actually come in. In the control phase, more than validating the results, you should be putting in place quality checks or controls or audits, basically, to make sure that from time to time you're checking if there is compliance in the process. The term comply is a bit funny for during the COVID, right? Dapat mag-comply ka. But really the main message there is the users need to comply, but someone needs to to monitor and police them from time to time. That's also where analytics can come in. With analytics, you can see whether users are really doing the process. You don't have to monitor them every hour, every day, but the numbers would speak for itself. If the numbers are not moving or if the numbers are declining, then more often than not, the users are not using the platform or they're not doing the things that they're supposed to do.
So just to reinforce the importance of measure and analyzing your data. Thank you for that, Aris. And we have two more questions, just the last two. How do you suggest I approach getting buy-in from the team and management for revamping my workflows? Our process has been working for some time, so some of them are hesitant to change it.
Great question. We do this in our discovery discussions. When I talk about discovery, when we try to approach a company that we'd like to work with, we talk about pain and challenges. Because normally, when you're presenting an idea, it's very easy for them to forget about it. But if you're discussing about a pain or a challenge that they are experiencing, it makes it more relatable. So what are examples? Instead of saying, okay, this could improve your hit rates, or this could improve this could improve the time that you spend in recruiting a candidate. You could talk about how is this impacting your personal targets. Are you happy with the way that you're contacting candidates? Are you happy with your conversions? Is it affecting you personally? Is it affecting your company? Are you losing money because of this? Are you at a risk of losing your job because of not improving your process? If you change the discussion and use use pain and challenges as a driver for discussion, it would be easily relatable, and you would definitely get someone's buy-in because you're basically alleviating pain. You're making them feel better, perform better, and not just introducing a new concept to them. That's the general idea in terms of change management.
Okay. Thank you for that. And just one last question for the interest of time. Someone asked, I personally like having all of the candidates' information before engaging with them. How can I capture that without having to make them fill up several forms?
Right, this is a problem of most of our customers in the beginning, where they try to ask like 15, 20, even 25 data points in the pre-screening process. Remember the purpose of the step. That's really what I would say. At the initial step of the process, you want to capture a lead and you want to turn it into an application. And you want to make it as easy as possible for them to submit their contact details or the application. And then you can collect additional information later on. All right, you can segment the collection of information across several steps. PocPush can help you aggregate all of those information so that even if you're asking them in different steps in the process, when you look at the candidate's profile, you still see a summary of all of those information collected throughout many steps. So again, um, put yourselves in the shoes of your candidates. If you yourself won't do that or won't complete that form because it's too tedious, imagine how the candidate would feel. So that's really one of the guidance that I would share, and then try to break it down into smaller steps, and use technology to aggregate the information. That's it.
That is great insights, Iris. Thank you so much again. We've extended a bit. We're over 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Over time. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We just wanted to promote real quick. We have a couple of events coming up. Next week, we will be having a webinar on freeze hiring, what you can do to overcome that. So we've invited Darwin Rivers, the president of the Philippine HR Group. So I hope you can join us. And thank you so much for attending. And we stay safe and hope to see you at the next one. Bye and thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.